Welcome back. Class is in session here in Lecture Hall Room 101 of the stately Apartment Academy. I am your Professor Cunningham here and the Dean of the Apartment Academy. The Apartment Academy podcast is the multifamily industry's only operations-focused podcast, featuring insights from industry leaders, investors, vendors, and technology providers. So if you invest in multifamily real estate or you're involved in the day-to-day operations of apartment buildings, we are your source for efficient operations and maximizing ROI. Today's podcast is with Justin Steltenpohl, who is COO of PB Bell, which is a Scottsdale-based owner, operator, developer of multifamily, and as we're going to learn now, build-to-rent communities. And we depart a little bit from the usual operations focus to talk a little bit about the economics behind developing dense multifamily communities versus build-to-rent and some of the trends that we're seeing that are going to continue to grow to support the build-to-rent environment. So I think today, especially if you're interested in learning about investing and operating single-family homes in a build-to-rent environment, today's going to be very interesting for you. So let's bring him on. Hi, Justin. Welcome to the Apartment Academy. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Daniel. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Justin, let's start off with talking, before we jump into talking a bit about PB Bell. You have, I think, probably a slightly different journey than a lot of folks that you find ending up as chief operating officers of significant operators like PB Bell. So, if you wouldn't mind, just talk a little bit about your background and then what brought you into the industry, because I know nobody gets here on purpose. Like it's by accident. So I'm guessing some similar story plays with you as well. So if you wouldn't mind, give us a little bit of background.
Yeah, it absolutely was by accident, a very fortunate accident for me. I originally started working with PB Bell back in the recession, helping them navigate their way through some of the difficulties. I was a finance lawyer by trade, ran into Chapin and Phil. Phil Bell is the original founder. Chapin is the current owner. And, just help them through navigating through that difficult time. I mean, so many operators, so many companies, so many real estate entities didn't survive that recession. And it's always been a source of pride that PB Bell was able to withstand that storm. Been around since '76. And so after that happened, Chapin and I actually developed a pretty close personal friendship. He kept telling me that, it was time for me to come on board and join the PB Bell team. And I said, that's great, but you can't afford me. So eventually in around 2014, they acquired a huge portfolio. It was actually the largest single transaction in Arizona history at the time. Eight properties, $168 million. And at that point in time, they kind of became big enough and they needed that full-time legal. So when I came on board, the idea was that I would continue with the legal side of things as I really learned the ins and outs of the business. And PB Bell is both a developer and an operator. We also have a construction arm through an affiliate of ours. So we really are a three-legged stool, if you will, having all aspects of the development in multifamily. And then once I kind of learned the ropes of the real multifamily, not the finance and the legal side of it, but the real side of it, I took over as COO, and now I run the development as the COO. I do asset manager type stuff for our property services group. So I have more of an owner perspective, although I do get to see behind the curtain, so to speak, from an operational standpoint.
And PB Bell's portfolio is, just to clarify for the audience, is there any third-party management, or is it all you develop, you own, and then operate?
We develop, we own, we operate, and we have third-party management as well. Actually, the majority of our portfolio these days is third-party. Much to our property services group's chagrin, I'm selling our developments way too fast for them. But in this market, you can't blame me for that. So,
yeah, right. When you can sell things at a 2 cap, hard to hold on to that.
But we aren't quite there yet, but we're getting close.
So the size, what's the size of the portfolio?
We fluctuate as we go in and out. We are only Phoenix based. We're actually getting ready. I shouldn't say we're only finished space. We do some third-party stuff up in Prescott, and we are getting ready to open our first Flagstaff project. But right now we fluctuate right around 10,000 units.
Got it. Got it. And what would you say from an operations standpoint, especially from sort of the corporate operations standpoint? Is there anything that you think PB Bell does just really well that sets the company up for success in terms of its policies, procedures?
I think we do a couple of things a little bit different. From a corporate standpoint, I think our values, our core values, really result in a very familial atmosphere that allows us to do a great job of not only um, getting the top talent, but actually retaining that talent. Um, we really do, the executive team, shape and down, we really do show up and recognize that it's our folks that make us who we are. I'm the folks that we have on site have 10 times the visibility to the public that I do. So when people think about PB Bell, they don't think about Justin. They think about the people that are renting and leasing. They think about our operational folks, and we do a great job, I think, better than anybody, in making sure those people realize they're appreciated and taking care of them.
Well, let's dive into that a little bit. You have a couple core values that I think are interesting, and certain one which is unusual, which is enjoy the ride. And you have another one which is akin to what show you care something
Correct.
along the yeah.
Yep.
So definitely understand those. Well, I definitely understand show you care within the context of what you just said, because if there's one thing people need to understand about this business, it is principally a people business.
Mm-hmm.
And so I hear you on that front, how important that is. Tell me a little about the enjoy the ride part, because I'll preface this by saying that I think, having been on the operations side myself, right, and the asset management side, it's a very difficult industry. The folks in the field, what they go through emotionally is difficult. It's a very stressful kind of. So tell me a little, how do you imbue the company with enjoy the ride in the midst of a profession that's often derided as being, just a grind?
It's an interesting concept. You'll notice, I don't know if you took a look at our website, but you notice that we have behaviors, and then at the end of our values and behaviors, we have enjoy the ride as kind of an overarching theme, because it really does impact every single one of our core values. And that is, you got to have fun. You got to love what you do. You got to be able to enjoy it, because, as you said, there's so much stress. There's so much negativity there, especially during this pandemic. I mean, it's reached epic heights, and everything seems to be polarizing people now. There's no middle ground to anything, it seems, anymore. And like show you care. It's interesting you point out those two, because from an operational standpoint, those really are the two most difficult. Being present, listening actively, respecting people and their time. You have to do that even when they're yelling at you. You have to recognize as an individual that this doesn't really have anything to do with you. You just happen to be the person that's standing in front of them. It could be you, it could be me, it could be the dog. But that's how, and you enjoy the ride by A, first and foremost, recognizing that, and B, taking pride in being able to get that person to come down a little bit, and recognizing that you can rise above that and still give them excellent service and turn that person. So the next time they come into that office, they're not yelling at you. And then go out and have a beer with your friends and relax a little bit. have,
How do
have
you
one on the company for that.
or two or three. How do you train on that, Justin? I think one is you obviously probably try to hire right. I can imagine these core values play in your hiring policies, but it's not a natural skill for many people. And so tell us a little bit, how does PB Bell, given how important that is, how do you support that in terms of training or otherwise? Maybe there's other things you do to teach those qualities.
A lot of it is just we have a lot of training on dealing with toxic people, dealing with adversity. We started out with what we called our Grow training program back in 2015. If we weren't the first, we were one of the first that had their own in-house training program. And it's just a continual training. You said it first and foremost is hiring the right people. And we hire people from all over. We hire a lot of different folks. I mean, I can tell you, I've been at a restaurant where I was that angry individual, and an individual talked me down in about 3 seconds, which for those that know me, know that that's virtually an impossible task. And I literally offer the person a job right on the spot. Because if they can talk me down, that's the kind of person we need to hire. And so, it's just a matter of finding that right person, continuing that training, and then positive reinforcement. We have our values in action. We have a lot of very positive reinforcement of that type of behavior. If you're living our values, you're going to be compensated.
So there's a compensation component. Is there a way then to measure the extent to which folks are representing these values? Is it a subjective?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's subjective. Everything is to a certain degree subjective. But we have programs in place where our residents can recognize people, other employees can recognize people. Even if you're not a resident, maybe you just did a tour and this person did a great job. You leave a comment that puts somebody up for an award, and we give these awards weekly, monthly. On top of all the other bonus programs we have, compensation is a huge part of it. Obviously, for most people, compensation in some form of recognition is really what people want. They just want to be recognized for doing that job, and we do our very best to do it. Are we perfect? Of course not, but we do our best.
For those of you out there that are considering getting into the business on the operations side, first of all, if you're going to work for a company, I would think this kind of culture would be key to look for, because you need this support, the kind of support you're talking about from your corporate headquarters, to make it through the difficult times. I mean, there's plenty to like about property management. I shouldn't, I don't want to make it sound, but it is critical, I think, to have the kind of support you're talking about for folks in the field, to feel like their contributions are, beyond just getting things leased up, right? That they're making a difference in people's lives. We, in this industry, we get a little bit of, very personal peek into personal things that are happening in people's lives. People get divorced and people lose their jobs, and they have to come and talk to the community manager about those things because it impacts their ability to pay rent. And to be able to sort of effortlessly handle those kind of delicate situations really makes a difference in resident satisfaction, I'm sure. Go ahead, Justin.
You make an interesting point. You talk about our values. I don't know if you looked at our overall mission, and the very first part of our mission is making lives and places better. And that's important to us. The executive team, I can tell Chapin and I feel very strongly that we are creating somebody's home. And you, as the property services person, are on the front line of creating that home and that experience for them. And I don't care if it's, a Class B affordable housing product or a Class A plus luxury product. That's somebody's home. And it's important that we allow that person to be proud of that home and be proud of the people they come home to, which is part of you as the staff. And we definitely look for that. We reward that. We preach that. It's every single thing we do. It really is. We're trying to make somebody's life better. That's our job.
Is there anything about the last 18 months with COVID that forced you to sort of retack how you approach supporting the folks in the field that you want to talk about?
Is there anything we haven't had to change? As the individual who set our policies, I can tell you that COVID was probably the most challenging time of my career. And as you can tell by looking at me, I am incredibly old. So it's been a very long career, but, and it was balancing. It's always balancing that, for us, we set out at the beginning and we said, we're not gonna do the bare minimum. Our people are our most important asset, and we need to take care of those people. We need to make sure that they are safe, that they feel safe, and that they know that they have our support above all else. So we closed down amenities before we were required to by government mandate. We didn't reopen when we said we could, when they said we could. We took the pulse of our people. We made sure our folks felt safe. And it was a matter of just recognizing that, something, hey, maybe the filter changes are going to have to take a back seat while we figure out how to do this and keep people safe. And then balancing that with overall operational needs. I still have to operate my property. I mean, if somebody's got a plumbing problem, I can't say, well, gee, I'd love to help you, but I'm worried about COVID. I got to go solve that plumbing problem. So tackling those issues and how to do it. But I think, again, for us, it was all about keeping our people safe and making sure that they felt comfortable.
I was on a panel at Apartmentalize last year. We talked about the focus was partly on policies and procedures, especially in the time of COVID. And somebody stated a statistic that in some areas there were as many as 35 different policy changes coming a week that were COVID related, health related, safety related, that sort of thing. How does PB Bell normally communicate policies and procedures out to the field and ensure that there's adherence to those, compliance? And did that change at all in the last 18 months?
Yeah, the probably the biggest change is the policies came from me. Normally, I'm not the one that's setting those out. We did very early on in the pandemic. Um, we started having weekly executive calls every Monday morning, where all we talked about for an hour and a half was COVID, the impact on our operations, and what we were going to do. And we did this for probably almost the first year of the pandemic, just to make sure that we were staying abreast of everything. It took up probably 80% of my time just trying to keep up. And the thing that was amazing is nobody really knew what was going on. You got such contradictory opinions and policies, and everything was coming from everywhere. We did manage to avoid that concept. We didn't change our policies that often. Again, we kind of were ahead of the curve, so we really didn't have to. And we stayed behind the curve, I guess ahead of the curve, if you will, in keeping stuff closed a little bit longer to see how things went. We took a very conservative approach, and I think that helped us in not changing policies 35 times a week. But I think probably the only difference, what we did, and this typically happens this way, we'll have the policy come out, it goes to the leasing manager on property, and that leasing manager is then required to make sure her folks are performing. And this is an individual, I mean, it's not like the old days where you had a $10 million asset. I mean, our assets are $150 million. So I'm putting somebody in charge of a $150 million asset. I think I should be able to rely on that person to pass along a policy change. And we do expect them to do that. We do expect them to adhere to it, and they do a fabulous job. Where I was getting, and again, we made it very personal. So if somebody had a question on COVID, it was either my HR director or me that they called. Every single person we had test positive or came into close contact, I was on the phone with them. And we did that intentionally. Again, just that reiteration of how important they are.
What about and forgive me, since I know there's various levels of responsibilities that COOs have in companies for day-to-day operations, but outside of policies and procedures relating to COVID, were there any other structural changes that PB Bell made that would be interesting to talk about? For example, virtual leasing, right? Did that take hold in PB Bell in the way it has other places? Do you think that will continue to gain traction in our industry?
It did. It was interesting because, as I said, we shut down before a lot of people did. And so when we shut down, you didn't have 27 different companies offering virtual tours and, all of the fun apps and everything you have these days. It's amazing to me to sit here and look and see where virtual tour went in a 7-month period of time. Our first virtual tour was a leasing agent walking around with a cell phone. I mean, that was literally our first virtual tour on a lease up property that we had. It has come a long way. I think it is here to stay to a certain degree. Our experience, and I think this is pretty consistent throughout, is that you can't replace that one-on-one contact, that personal connection, as you said earlier. It's all about this is a person industry, and it's a people industry, and you have to make that personal connection. You want to be successful in operations, make that person your friend, and you will be successful. We had a leasing agent. It's one of my favorite stories. She was by far the best leasing agent we ever had. She would get shopped, and she would just get awful scores on her shops. I mean, just awful scores. But everybody who walked in, even the shops, they were like, I felt like they were my best friend, and so that person was incredibly successful. So I don't think you're ever going to see a complete replacement and going to I shouldn't say ever, maybe in 10 years you will, but I don't think that's a near-term thing. I think people will use it. It'll be a screening tool. I think it's a great screening tool. But I think at the end of the day, people want to come in and see who their community managers, who their community staff is going to be. And I think those people will always be critical to a well-run operation.
Do you think the same can be said for the rise of bots that are answering, leasing inquiries and that sort of thing? Yeah.
I think all that stuff, Daniel, to be honest with you, has to do with this instantaneous concept we have. Everybody wants things now. Nobody wants to wait 20 minutes. They call you up at 9 o'clock at night. They want to answer at 9 o'clock at night. And so I think you give them, you have your chatbots that come up and give them the nice answer, so they feel like they're doing something and getting that instant 15-second social media response. But yeah, at the end of the day, Chatbot can't go and fix your plumbing. Chatbot can't take your maintenance request. Chatbot isn't going to come talk to you about what you have to do because you're getting a divorce. That personal connection is always going to be there. It's always going to be required. The other thing you have to realize is, especially now, the biggest change I've even seen since I've been, and I'm not, a 50-year veteran of multifamily, but the biggest difference I'm seeing now is the absolute diversity in our renter pool. I got everybody from 20-year-olds in college to 60-year-old multimillionaires living in the same property. And I can tell you, these two people do not want the same thing. There's a very, very diverse renter pool, and trying to adhere to the requirements of each one is very, very challenging. And again, it takes that personal touch. A chatbot's not for everybody.
Yeah. There's also, you said this just a second ago. A chatbot can't fix your toilet. There is more discussion though about pushing more maintenance out to the resident, the DIY maintenance option. You feel similarly about that, I imagine.
I think it depends. I think it depends upon, we don't do a lot of high rise. I'm somewhat familiar with high rise, but we don't do a lot of that. But I'm not sure I want my resident doing a whole lot in a high rise building. Now, in a build for rent, that's slightly different, especially if it's all detached. And I think in the build for rent detached space, you're going to see a lot of that because, there's kind of a divergent right now about whether that operational model for a build-to-rent product is the same as it is for a traditional garden or a high-rise or what have you. I probably land more in the camp that it's not really the same. There are some differences, although I think if as your core business you excel at general operations, you're going to excel there. Operations is operations. If you're good at it, you're good at it, and you'll figure it out. But I do see that type of self-service becoming very common in that area.
Single family home, built to rent. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Much more decentralized maintenance and probably leasing.
And if they screw it up, they're only screwing up their unit. I don't risk them screwing up 400 different units. When you got 400 units in danger, I think I'd probably take it myself. Thanks. Maybe things like changing filters, but even something like that, you're kind of relying on that person to actually do it. And, even if it's an ongoing maintenance item like that, and, how many of us in our own personal homes change our air filters every 90 days? I do it simply because I've worked for a real estate company. I know what happens if you don't. So,
has PB Bell traditionally developed detached for rent housing?
No, as a matter of fact, Phoenix is kind of the birthplace of it. It's really interesting. It really kind of started and grew here, and it's exploded just on a popularity standpoint. Not only with respect to buyers, your price per unit is way higher. Your rents are a little bit higher. It's real popular with renters, and right now it's the soup du jour for all of the investors. Everybody wants to invest in build for rent. We are actually in the process of we've got I think 3 of them right now ready to go, and we'll be doing those here shortly.
Well, that's the end of part 1 of today's interview with our guest professor. Tune in next time for the rest of the interview.